Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Interesting article from Reuters, and it's interesting because, at least for me, two wrongs don't make a right. And the other one, the Russians claim, the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu claims that Russia did not use cluster munitions in Ukraine yet, but that he might be thinking of using cluster munition if the Ukrainians will use it. And here is where the two wrongs don't make a right comes into play. But hey, let's see what Reuters have to say about this change, or at least the threat of using the cluster munition. So obviously Reuters today, the 11th of July 2023. Russia says it may use similar weapons if US supplies cluster bombs to Ukraine. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said on Tuesday that Moscow would be forced to use similar weapons if the United States supplied cluster bombs to Ukraine. Russian news agencies reported. What do you mean you're forced? It's up to you to make a decision. Nobody forces you. If someone rapes during a war, it doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. But hey, that's their choice. They do whatever they want. They are not signatories of that agreement, of cluster munitions. So neither is United States. The US announced last week it would supply Ukraine with cluster munitions, explosive weapons that typically release large numbers of smaller bomblets over a wider area. They are banned by over 100 countries. A bit like this, huh? Shoigu was quoted as saying that Russia was in possession of cluster munitions, but had so far refrained from using them in its military campaign. So this is according to Russians. Hey, we didn't use it, but we might use it if they use it. However, the US has previously accused Russia of using cluster munitions in Ukraine. The same thing is sounds true for the United States. Hey, wait a minute. If they use it, and you call it wrong, you use it, we'll call it right. It's going to be two wrongs. Anyway, so the US accused Russia and said they have had a failure rate of over up to 40%, leaving the ground littered with unexploded bomblets. Washington says the cluster munitions it is sending to Ukraine have a failure rate of less than 2.35%. All right, we'll see how that's going to work. So if you send, let's say, 100, you're going to have 2.3 around 100 pieces, bomblets. Right? So you send one with 100, you're going to have about 2 or 3 over there, 2 and 2.35. All right. Well, if you want to do it that way, well, do it, I guess. And I'm quoting, in the event that the United States supplies cluster munitions to Ukraine, the Russian armed forces will be forced to use similar weapons against the armed forces of Ukraine as a response, end quote, Shoigu said on Tuesday. Now, I suspect that the guys who send the cluster munitions to the Ukrainians to attack the Russians don't give a shit about because it's Ukrainian versus Russians, and they are the ones that are okay. Send them more. Okay, all right. That's what I really dislike about the whole thing. When I see that there's other interests, there are other interests over there that are benefiting, and some of them are promoting and pushing, channeling certain kind of weapons into more destruction and more destruction. Why? Because they don't want to negotiate and they don't want to talk about it. And the problem is not necessarily those guys over there, is the Ukrainian and the Russian governments for not being able to really find a common denominator. The problem is they found one with the Minsk agreements, 1 and 2, but Ukraine decided that, hey, Maybe not. We're not going to implement it. Neither did Angela Merkel and Hollande, the French president at that time, and German chancellor. They, in interviews, they didn't. Oh, we're just buying time for Ukraine to arm itself. That was the justification. Now that's weasel. Now, and I'm quoting, it should be noted that Russia has cluster munitions in service for all occasions. So for baptizing, births, deaths, they are much more effective than American ones. End quote. He said, effective in killing or effective in not exploding, like the 2.35%. All right, effective like what? Better in killing, I'm assuming. Shoigu added that the Russian army was taking measures to protect its troops from such weapons. Human Rights Watchdog says both Moscow and Kiev have used cluster munitions during the nearly 17-month conflict in Ukraine, which Russia calls a special military operation. So they both used them. The US, Russia, and Ukraine have not signed up to the Convention of Cluster Munitions. US officials say they granted Kiev's request for cluster bombs after it became apparent that Ukraine, now waging a counteroffensive against Russia, was running out of regular artillery ammunition and production would not meet its needs. Well, and after this, what are they going to send? Nuclear weapons? So after the United States, let's put it this way, Ukraine will run out of the provided cluster munitions. If we use the same logic that the regular ammunition they ran out of, now, there will be a time when they will run out of cluster ammunition. What's going to be next? Nuclear weapons? What else do these guys have in their stocks that they have plenty of besides nuclear weapons? Well, close US allies, including Britain, Canada, and Germany, have expressed their opposition to the use of cluster munition, but they can't do anything. If things would have been reversed, things could have been stopped. But hey, in this case, everything goes. It's not us, it's them. In other comments, Shoigu said Russia was significantly reducing the potential of Ukraine's counteroffensive and that Russian forces had gained ground during their own counterattack in the direction of Liman in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Well, they all say they're winning. That includes the Ukrainians, who I read an article saying that they claimed they liberated about 10 square kilometers today. Okay, well, that's going to show. We'll find out. And they caused a lot of destruction in Bakhmut area, where supposedly some Russians, came out and said, "Hey, don't shoot. We don't want to fight anymore." They were taken into custody or prisoners. So this is it. 2 wrongs will make a right, I guess. And these guys don't care. I mean, just do it. And after they run out of cluster munitions, what's next on the list? Okay. We'll see how they justify it then. Like they justified the atomic bombs that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's shorten the war. Let's save our boys' lives. That was a justification, my friends. And that was a blackmail again. And they wouldn't have stopped it too if the Japanese government hadn't succumbed and say, you know what, okay, you killed enough civilians, we're going to sign the unconditional surrender. Because this guy said, we're going to start with 1, we're going to start with 2nd, we're going to start with 3rd, we're going to start with 4th. So now put this, the same ideology, philosophy, practice, let's say the Russians will say, you know what, I think we can shorten this war if we do what the Americans did in 1945, 6th of August and 9th of August. And we save our boys, their boys, and we just finish the whole thing in no time. Do you think that they would be acceptable? Of course not. But they're not using that as a pretext. What does that tell you? Because they're bad people. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.